The Honourable, the Speaker.
May I ask the whip and the leader of the House to please help constitute a quorum. Member for Tobago West, you have 13 minutes and 50 seconds left.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's 13 minutes of
the original speaking time.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before we left for the tea break, I was speaking about the health and safety project that we are doing with CAFA, and I just want to thank Dr. Lisa Indar of CAFA, who has been working diligently in getting this project off the ground. She has been collaborating with the Ministry of Tourism and the TDC. I want to especially thank her because she would have answered immediately my request to have as many stakeholders in Trinidad benefit from this program, and she also would have taken my recommendation to have the project done in Tobago also. We have established the link between CAFA and the Tobago House of Assembly, and I'm pleased to say that the project has been launched in Tobago, also making it truly national and giving the Tobago House of Assembly the opportunity to benefit what we are also getting here in Trinidad. I want to speak a little bit about physical upgrades. We have been working with the communities and different community groups in doing refurbishment works and beautification works, especially also to the sites that are under the remit of the TDC. We have done physical refurbishment works in funds and mans, repair works to the building, the kitchen, the bathrooms. We've done repair works at the Lopino Heritage Site. This year we did works at the Maracas Beach Community Tourism Initiative, where we have done work on the Maracas Beach jetty, the gazebo, the car park, upgrade the walkover bridge, landscaping, emergency sewer repairs. At the Las Cuevas Beach Enhancement Project, we would have done work by establishing a saline-resistant fence, and we refurbished and upgrade the restaurant, the parking lot, and the public washroom. I want to place on record that the Las Cuevas beach is the only blue flag accredited beach in the southern hemisphere, and it got blue flag accreditation this year for the third time. We have also been liaising with blue flag certification is an international quality standard for water quality, environmental education, and information, environmental management, safety, and other services. So you have to conduct different tests on the water throughout the year to make sure that it is not contaminated, and we are keeping best practices. The Europeans, they like this kind of environmental, sustainable projects, and Las Cuevas is the only one in the southern hemisphere. We have gotten the United Nations group to liaise with the Tobago House of Assembly, and that link has been set up, and they are now working with the Tobago House of Assembly looking at 3 beaches. So during this fiscal year, they will be working with THA to get 3 beaches. I think Englishman's Bay is one of the beaches that will be seeking Blue Flag accreditation. Now the Manzanella Beach facility, same thing. Upgrade works on the parking lot, upgrade works on the restaurant, installation of seating. Vestini Beach, car park refurbishment, upgrade of the restaurant, installation of perimeter fencing, and basically the upgrade and maintenance of these sites that are under our remit. The Labre Pitch Lake, you would have seen on International Tourism Day, we would have opened the newly refurbished Labre Pitch Lake, improving the visitor experience for the people of Labre and those visiting the largest pitch lake in the world. We did landscaping works, painting of the building. We did a ramp to allow the differently able and the aged to access that visitor center. Now the Maracas Beach facility, the Maracas Beach project. As you are well aware, and the people of this nation are well aware, that in April, the cabinet would have taken the decision to cease works under the previous that we would have done some investigation and decided to cease works under the previous contractor, and over this fiscal year we would have done remedial works as it relates to road works, drainage and the sewer system, so that the people of Maracas could continue to enjoy the facility. In this new fiscal year, the project would be done under with the guidance with the project management services of NIDCO, and it has been broken up into 3 projects: road works and the upgrade of drainage and park facilities that will be done through PRIO. The second package is building construction, and that will be done through NIDCO. That's for the construction of the vending booths and the boardwalk. You know what? As I mentioned, the boardwalk, Madam Speaker, do you know that under the previous dispensation of the project, these visitor booths were built at least 2 feet over above the ground level, and that was done with the intention of doing a boardwalk, but the boardwalk was not a part of the previous contract. So after the previous contractor had completed the Maracas booths or the Maracas project in the previous dispensation, how would people access the building if there was no boardwalk? Another contract. Exactly. So, Madam Speaker, we are moving speedily ahead with this to bring some relief to the visiting public. The Sugar Heritage site is the Sugar Heritage Museum is another project, an IDF project that was placed under my remit in the previous fiscal year. Now we got an allocation of $7 million, but that was based on a PwC, a Pricewaterhouse recommendation that we execute this project under several ministries for 15 years at $539 million. Now, Madam Speaker, at the time when that decision was made, our financial and economic situation was different, and to date, our situation has changed. So we have decided to go ahead with the museum, which is going to be under the remit of the Ministry of Culture, and look at and that is what is going to be done at this time. We cannot implement that project in the current dispensation, in the current configuration, thank you, because our economic situation just doesn't allow us to. I want to turn now to some niche areas, business, tourism. We hold 14.7% of the people that visit Trinidad and Tobago come for the purpose of business, meetings, conventions. We are among the we are most favored in the English-speaking Caribbean for hosting these conferences, and we would have done at least 7 major conferences during the previous fiscal year. Domestic tourism, as you are well aware, Madam Speaker, domestic tourism, business in the domestic tourism area keeps our local tourism industry alive and well when international arrivals are low. Our 2015 survey tells us that 150,387 households in Trinidad and Tobago took about 2 trips in the year of 2015, and that generated over $862 million. So it goes a long way in keeping our local tourism industry alive and well. Our Stay to Get Away program, which is like a staycation program encouraging locals to vacation at home. That was executed this year and launched in July 2016, and that program had not been done since the year 2011. It was very successful. We would have exceeded our targets. We would have targeted for 5,200 participants, and we got 5,900 people participating. We partnered with many community organizations, the Natural Trust, and even the PTSC to get locals around to enjoy all that Trinidad and Tobago has to offer. Now, Tobago would have launched its own staycation program called Endless Vacation, and that is running throughout the entire year. I want to place on the record my concern still as it relates to inter-island transport. I consider inter-island transport, especially for the people of Tobago, as an essential service, and I know that the Ministry of Works and Transport, that's responsible for the Port Authority, and the Ministry of Finance, that's responsible for Caribbean Airlines, they are working diligently on relief, on bringing some relief as it relates to these matters, and the Ministry of Tourism serves on a committee to treat with that. Now, Carnival 2016, as a Minister of Tourism and also as a masquerader, Madam Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I mention niche areas and not mention Carnival, because Carnival alone brings over 9% of our total arrivals for the year, and they spend about 13 to 14 days, and the average tourist spends $154 more than the other tourists who comes for other reasons other than Carnival. So, Madam Speaker, I think that this year, Carnival alone would have generated $354 million, and each tourist would have spent about $9,597. So Carnival goes a long way for us. This is a testimony of what the development of our cultural expressions could do for our economy. So we welcome the sustainable development of all cultural celebrations, the Ramleelas, the Diwali, and all that Trinidad and Tobago has to offer. Madam Speaker, we did well also in cruise tourism. This is the first year that we got 68% increase in tourism arrivals. 100,791 cruise passengers. That's roughly 30,000 for Trinidad and 70,000 for Tobago. So Tobago would have performed very well in cruise tourism this year, and that not just in terms of arrival, but in terms of spending. In Trinidad would have earned $7.38 million, and Tobago would have earned $29.5 million based on spending from the 85% of the passengers who would have came off the ship to enjoy what we have to offer. Now, airlift. Now, preliminary data show that so far for the year, airlift is air passenger arrivals are down roughly 5%, and that is attributed to a decline in airline services. You have reduced airlift from UK and the Scandinavian market. Also, there had been a drop in fares from the US in many of the other destinations. There had been an 18% to 28% drop in airfares for the other destinations, while in Trinidad and Tobago the prices fell by only 11%. In Tobago, the situation is more dire because Novier, that would have flown last year, is not flying anymore, and the same could be said for, I think it's for Monarch. But I'm happy to announce that based on consultations with Condo, I remember last year at WTM, the THA was firming up their negotiations, and this winter, Tobago is going to welcome 2 new Condo flights from Manchester and from Germany. So, Madam Speaker, investment. Now, investment. There are 2 main investment programs that we would have done this year, and that's custom and excise duty exemption. We had 49 stakeholders benefiting from this, and that's two accommodation facilities. I think one is Paria Suites in Trinidad and Mount Irving, not Mount Irvine Hotel in Tobago. And we would have given concessions for over 35 drivers in Tobago.
Go west. Your original 45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself of it.
Thank you, Madam
may
Speaker.
continue.
So, sure, definitely. Occupancy rate. I was surprised to see on the internet and in the newspapers reports that occupancy rate is 10% and 7%. I had the benefit of being a part of a stakeholders forum in Tobago. I was invited by the Secretary of Tourism. And the occupancy rate for Trinidad is 60%, and for Tobago is still 40%, like it has been for the past 4 years. What was interesting is when the secretary asked this stakeholder, so why is it that you guys are telling people that it's 10% and lower? No answer, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, TTIC is a voluntary, TTIC is a standards program to ensure that standards are kept and maintained. Now, we are the only destination in the Caribbean where standards in the tourism sector is not regulated and not compulsory, it's voluntary. And that is not good for us if we intend to take the sector to the next level. We talk about all that we want to gain and obtain from tourism, but we have to do what is necessary to remain on par with the rest of the nation. So a new project in this year would be geared towards establishing a regulatory system for the tourism sector. Now, Madam Speaker, as it relates to marketing and sponsorship. Marketing and sponsorship. We would have sponsored events like Soca Monarch, Chutney Monarch, Kiddies Carnival. We would have sponsored the culinary team with a sponsorship of $100,000, and the culinary team was very successful. They won for the 6th consecutive year in the Taste of the Caribbean competition. As it relates to marketing, many new marketing initiatives have been undertaken, and I'm running out of time, so I would get the chance to expand on these matters in the finance bill. But we are really looking at our marketing strategy to ensure that the stakeholders are engaged. I remember one year Trinidad and Tobago would have gone to WTM and did the trade show, and our theme was something related to Incredible India. Now, when Trinidad and Tobago does an Incredible India theme, what do you leave for India to do? A terrific Trinidad and Tobago? Madam Speaker, so we really have to look at our marketing strategy. I think that in marketing there needs to be transparency and accountability, and marketing representatives ought to be judged or ought to be assessed on their performance. So we are reviewing the overseas marketing reps, and we are going out once again and giving the stakeholders the opportunity to have their input. We are also making better use of online, of electronic media and technology in marketing the destination, since most of our major markets in the US, they use online facilities in order to make their bookings. We are training travel agents through electronic media and so on. We have also done a review of the... No, before I go on to that, as it relates to trade shows, what is interesting is we would have done some work in trying to streamline spending and cutting waste and mismanagement. As it relates to trade shows, over the years 2011 to 2014, we have been spending at least $2 million in airline tickets and per diem for people to go to trade shows. Madam Speaker, I want to say that the days of junkets and fun trips and so on are over. And we have to get to a place of attending the only the trade shows that would bring significant benefits to us. So we have moved from $2 million in airline tickets and per diems to $400,000, roughly $400,000 this year. Madam Speaker, a former TDC chairman told me the kind of cuts and the kind of things that you're doing as it relates to what I was doing, we're trying to streamline the spending and so on with this company. So people, they are not going to like you, but I want to say I didn't come here for likes. I came here to protect the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago and to advance this sector to where it needs to be. Before anything else relating to tourism, Madam Speaker, I would take that up in the finance bill. How much time do I have left, Madam Speaker?
You go. Forget the time.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, thank you. Madam Speaker, I want to return to, oh, I forgot where I am. I want to return, Madam Speaker, to Tobago, because there's much, we would have done a review of the TDC, Madam Speaker, so we'll be making some necessary changes to retool and re-engineer the TDC to better serve our tourism interests. Now, Madam Speaker, as I said before, tourism in Tobago is under the remit of the Tobago House of Assembly, and we here, the Ministry of Tourism, the Cabinet is going to do all within our power to assist the Tobago House of Assembly and the people in Tobago in attaining their goals as it relates to tourism. To that end, Madam Speaker, I want to say that we are doing things like the power plant at Cove to give more electricity services to Tobago, the desalination plant to relieve water shortages and so on. And this is not done because of sandals. This is done because these are activities that we have been talking about and promising Tobago for years. But this is a government that remains true and committed to investing in Tobago and providing a better quality of life for the people of Tobago. Now we understand, Madam Speaker, that in this time we are challenging economic times and the entire nation faces these challenges and these cuts. And nobody is immune from these cuts. So we understand that the role that we have to play. But what I am comforted by, Madam Speaker, is even though our allocation was cut, we got 4.45% this year. And under the People's Partnership, we would have gotten exactly 4.03% to the cent. Sometimes if they could cut a penny in half, they would cut a penny and give it to us. That's to tell you it was exact 4.03%. So I'm thankful for the consideration of this government, and we understand that we have to share the burden of going through these economic times. I'm also thankful for the gesture and the love shown in respecting Tobago's autonomy. Now we have more members from the Tobago House of Assembly on board. And that collaborative spirit of getting things done in Tobago, developing the marina, and a number of other new projects. Now, even the RC project, the Roman Catholic project, where poor member of Parliament for Cuba South would have said, go on. Now, Madam Speaker, she clearly does not understand how to read Cuba North, how to read the Tobago House of Assembly expenditure, Madam Speaker, because we have the flexibility to move things around. I, Madam Speaker, was at the turning event for the RC project, RC school project. I was there, Madam Speaker, and for the first time, EFCL is going to partner with the Tobago House of Assembly to get that school done. Madam Speaker, so even she spoke about 19% of education, but you can't look at 19% of tertiary education in isolation, Madam Speaker. To understand where we are right now, you have to understand where we came from. Madam Speaker, when we came into power in the year 2000, 2001, we were in single digits. I'm talking about 4%, 5%. People couldn't afford tertiary education. When I graduated from school in 1998, there was no gate, there was no avenue for tertiary education, but thanks to the People's National Movement, people of Tobago can sing a different song, Madam Speaker, from the number of secondary schools, the number of basketball courts. But Madam Speaker, this is a new day for the people of Tobago. And if you, no matter what you say, I want to let you know, we remember. And when we go to the polls next year, we will continue to remember. Madam Speaker, with that said, I want to thank you.
It appears that the tea was very full in, and well, I would like members to please control their sugar levels. Member for Arouca, Maloney.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to join this debate at this time. And I would like to congratulate my colleagues who have already spoken and who I think has done the People's National Movement and the government of Trinidad and Tobago proud. And also the 23 constituencies that they represent, those who have already spoken. I think they have done their constituents proud. So, Madam Speaker, I pay tribute to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, I am really extremely humbled and privileged to speak in this House and in this debate, and to speak in my capacity as Minister of Planning and Development and as Member of Parliament for Arouca Maloney. And I take this opportunity to congratulate my colleague, the Minister of Finance, and the members of his ministry who worked assiduously in making sure that we have these budget documents and budget figures before us today. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the Ministry of Planning and Development, who made it, the members of staff who made it possible for us to have the PSIP document for Trinidad and Tobago, and the specific PSIP document for Tobago. I pay homage to them for the long nights that they spent working on these documents, and I congratulate them for this. Madam Speaker, I would like to begin by reaffirming my faith in the people of Trinidad and Tobago and in my fellow countrymen and countrywomen, and who I know will come together, as my colleague from Laventille East Morvan said, all hands on deck to make sure that we surmount these challenges in which we find ourselves at this time, and to make the sacrifices that are necessary to build a stronger Trinidad and Tobago, a better country, a country of which we can all be proud. And Madam Speaker, I would like at this point to crave your indulgence and ask you to allow me to read quite a bit of the information that I have here, and I ask this under Standing Order 4410.
And just for the guidance of all members, Standing Order 4410 is being relaxed because of the peculiarity of the budget debate. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, I stood here and listened in utter amazement at during the 3-hour contribution of the member for Cyperia. And what I thought was even more amazing, Madam Speaker, was the almost complete homage and obeisance that the member for Princestown, the member for Couva South, and other members of those opposite to us paid to the member for Cyperia for her contribution in this debate. You know, at one point I was saying that Pope Francis seemed to have made a mistake, that it isn't St. Teresa of Calcutta, but really St. Camille of Cyperia, because the obeisance that was paid was amazing to me, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, you know, what I'm sorry that my colleague from Princestown is not here, because he and I share quite a lot in common. We do, because like him, I was one of the youngest when I came to the Parliament initially. I was one of the youngest here. And like him, I have a great love and passion for the men and for the women of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have a passion for the boys and the girls of Trinidad and Tobago, and really want to serve the men and women of Trinidad and Tobago. And I really want to warn him in particular, because he's a young member of Parliament, Madam Speaker, that truth and loyalty, even though he may reside on that side of the house, truth and loyalty can reside in the same house. Truth and loyalty, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, too often we stand here in this parliament, or we sit here in this parliament, and we on this side are loyal to our political leader and the Prime Minister, and we respect the fact that he is a man who upholds the values of truth in particular. And Madam Speaker, I am so sorry that I cannot necessarily say the same thing about the leader on the other side. And Madam Speaker,
And she cannot say the same thing about the leader on the side, on our side, with respect to truth.
1 minute, please. 1 minute, please. Arouca Maloney, just be careful with respect to where you're going. I don't think she said anything offensive as yet.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for that. But Madam Speaker, I am not saying this lightly. Madam Speaker, you would recall that during the debate, the member for Siparia created an entire story about Jerry Brooks, about Ansa McCall, and about other persons in society. And Madam Speaker, with your leave, I'd like to read from The Guardian of Saturday, October 8th, 2016, at page A18, and it says, "A stain that is difficult to rub out. This is not the first occasion when something of this nature has taken place. The abuse of freedom by politicians to serve their own ends. There were the allegations against Dr. Rowley. In the circumstances of the last couple days, there were private people and corporations offended, with them not having the right of reply in the same venue and with the same privilege. This indeed is a stain that is difficult to rub out." And I continue. "We refer to the allegations made by opposition leader Camille Persad-Bissessar of some underhanded, corrupt collaboration between named individuals, the Ansa McCall Corporation, and government officials. The allegations are in reference to shareholding in the TNT NGL and supposed connections to company officials. At the core of the allegations is the claim that there is a collaboration between officials of the company with certain shareholders in the TTNGL and the government, the intention being to sell shares in the company in the planned share sale announced by Finance Minister Colum Imbert in his budget presentation." I continue to quote, Madam Speaker. "At best, Mrs. Persad-Bissessar based her conclusion on mere conjecture. No substantial facts or anything approaching such hard evidence could be reasonably deduced from her statement." I continue to quote, Madam Speaker. "Also, quite obvious is Mrs. Persad-Bissessar's manipulation of the date of Mr. Jerry Brooks' retirement date from the Ansa McCall Group to suit her purposes. Fortunately, for the reputation of those involved..."
This is the last time I'm warning you with respect to observing the rule for members not speaking. Please continue, Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. "Fortunately, for the reputation of those involved, and as a means of conveying correct information to the national community," and I repeat, correct information to the national community, Finance Minister Imbert told reporters the reality of the situation. And Madam Speaker, I continue. Sunday Guardian, October 2nd, page 19. And it says in an article of that date, typical of the governing style of Camille Persad-Bissessar as displayed during her 5 years and 3 months in office, she takes responsibility for little. And Madam Speaker, just to continue my point, I quote again, and it's the editor's note of October 8th. The statement by opposition leader Camille Prasad-Bissessar that 5 of the top 10 shareholders of TTNGL are associated with the Ansa Makal Group is plainly incorrect. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar is also incorrect that Mr. Brooks retired as the Chief Operating Officer and Manufacturing Sector Head at Ansa Makal after last year's general election, according to the TNT Stock Exchange filing of April 2nd, 2015. Mr. Brooks retired from the group effective April 30th, 2015, more than 4 months before the election. End of quote. And Madam Speaker, I just want to use this opportunity to say that how can you base almost your entire budget presentation on a fabricated story? Madam Speaker, I repeat, truth and loyalty can reside in the same house. There's nothing wrong with speaking the truth on occasion. But Madam Speaker, that seems to be impossible with those on the other side. And Madam Speaker, I just want to take the opportunity before I go into my full presentation to remind those on the other side that it was when the member for Oropouche East talks about Karaili growing on the Kufa Hospital, it was only in September that that location stopped being a construction site. And I want to remind them of the pumpkin that was growing in the hole that should have been the National Library of Trinidad and Tobago under their tenure. Several years ago, Madam Speaker, but as was said then, they said that we didn't need a national library in Port of Spain. And I want to remind them also that strangely enough, when the member for Oropouche East talks about, as he put it, those on this side saying, giving carte blanche to criminals by saying that people in jacket and tie also commit crimes, I want to remind them of their long tirade over years of saying that O'Halloran and Privat were criminals in this country. Madam Speaker, I have no brief for either, but I will make the point that at that time, and as my colleague from Tobago West said, it is good for you to say that, but when we say it, it's a problem. But Madam Speaker, that is not how we intend to run this country. Let me also make the point that with regard to the Prime Minister's residence in Tobago, Madam Speaker, that is the level of disrespect that those on the other side have for even the office of Prime Minister, that they would find that putting aside money to repair the residence is a problem. The member for Oropouche East even made the point that when he came to the cabinet to ask for funding, they almost ran him out of the cabinet for that reason. But that is the same feeling that allowed the member for Cypria to spend months in Gopal's residence whilst there was a Prime Minister's residence there. That is the same feeling of disrespect for the office of Prime Minister that allowed the member for Cypria to stay at her own private residence whilst allegedly her sister was staying in the official residence of the Prime Minister. It is a total disrespect for the office of Prime Minister. And Madam Speaker, that is also the level of disrespect that they paid to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago when they allowed the previous member for Tobago East to stand in this Parliament and denigrate our then leader of the opposition and raise an entire untruth about his parents and about the Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West. But that is how they feel about the institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, that brings me to the fact that as a government, we have certain imperatives to restore what was debased over the last 5 years. And Madam Speaker, our first imperative as a government must be for adjustment and stabilization. Madam Speaker, when this government came into office a year ago, our first imperative was to stabilize and to effect an adjustment to the reality of lower oil and gas prices and lower production levels. The adjustment, Madam Speaker, had to be immediate and it had to be systematic. So, Madam Speaker, when those on the other side said we made cuts, and some are saying that the cuts should be deeper, Madam Speaker, we had to make adjustments. And I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance for ensuring that the adjustments were made and made in such a way that not one person within the public service lost their job. Not one person. And Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate those on this side who ensured that they held their ministries together in circumstances where there was so much debt subsisting in every ministry, correct, so many bills left to be paid, that it is a wonder that we didn't find ourselves in a destabilized position. Oh, yeah. I congratulate my colleagues on ensuring that that did not happen. And Madam Speaker, our second imperative as we take this country forward is to ensure that there is diversification. And Madam Speaker, for years, governments, including previous PNM governments, have spoken about diversifying our economy. And Madam Speaker, diversification is not the easiest road to take. But in these circumstances, it must be done. And our past approaches to diversification clearly have been flawed. But Madam Speaker, I want to make the point that one approach that we made to diversification has been very successful. And that approach had been using our same oil and gas resources to diversify along the value chain. So that petrochemicals was our first foray into diversification, and we did it successfully. And let me say, Madam Speaker, that it was under PNM administration that petrochemicals became the first major diversification in this economy. And also, Madam Speaker, years ago, when we were telling our manufacturers that they needed to re-examine their production capacity, to re-examine their labor force, re-examine how they produced, we were vilified. But Madam Speaker, that redounded to better economic circumstances for our manufacturers, and today they are called the titans of manufacturing within the Caribbean region, because we insisted that they operate in a certain way. And it is in the same way that under this administration, we will work assiduously to ensure that there is diversification. Madam Speaker, The desired outcomes of the diversification effort will be to increase export earnings from the non-hydrocarbon sector, to ensure savings in foreign exchange utilization, especially for imported consumption goods, and to enhance the country's essential hard and soft infrastructure, such as ports, airports, roads, highways, bridges, ICT, education, health, and wellness. Madam Speaker, our third imperative must be transformation. And Madam Speaker, this transformation must be social transformation, and we of the PNM have long championed the crafting of a social sector that in all its parts would benefit all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In the area of education, curriculum reform is a priority, particularly in terms of establishing an overarching ICT in education policy that will enable advances such as ICT-infused lesson plans for students. Madam Speaker, with respect to the health sector, we are close to determining the most appropriate health insurance model for citizens, whilst continuing the construction of the Arima and Point Fortin hospitals, and we will, as my colleague said, be starting the Sangre Grande Hospital, and the Couva Hospital and Training Facility will be operationalized via public-private partnership. Going forward, Madam Speaker, effectiveness and efficiency of social assistance cash programs must be achieved, and this will involve improving targeting mechanisms, establishing and implementing independent scientific monitoring and evaluation procedures, and ensuring more rigid means of testing. It must be, Madam Speaker, that the social impact studies and audits of key social programs must be put in place during this time. Madam Speaker, I would like to remind those on the other side of the harsh reality of what we met when we came into governance. They keep boasting that they did not raise a single tax. And Madam Speaker, that might be true. But the harsh reality is, Madam Speaker, that whilst they did not raise a single tax, they did not either create any new revenue streams. They did not diversify the economy, and they spent money like if it was going out of style. Madam Speaker, this situation has had a tremendous negative impact on our fiscal space, as revenues from the oil and gas sector fell an estimated 80%, from approximately US $20 billion in 2014 to almost $2 billion in 2016. And the impact of this fall was exacerbated by the fact that the previous government had incurred 5 budget deficits from 2011 to 2014 and presided over a ballooning of expenditures from $47 billion in 2010 to $63 billion in 2014. But Madam Speaker, let me make another point. Madam Speaker, we have sat here and we have been told that food prices have gone up under us, that inflation has gone up under us. But you know, I'm hearing the member for Naparima saying murders. And you know, they keep saying that when we are in government, murders increase. But have they ever noticed when they are in opposition, murders increase?
Correct.
When you are in opposition, murders increase. And that is very significant. Very, very curious. Very curious. Whenever you are in opposition.
Must be something in the southern side of the room. Please continue, Member for Arouca Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, they always say, when you in government, murders increase. But we notice when you in opposition, murders increase. And we wonder about that. We wonder about that. Well, we killing. And Aparima, that means that we killing people. Huh? Okay.
He said he admitted it.
Member for Laventille. Member for Laventille, do you have a point of order?
I'm looking for the standing right here. Admitted.
Member for Laventille, thank you so much for the very light moment. Please continue, Member for Arouca Maloney.
So, Madam Speaker, we wonder about that. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I said, we wonder about that. But I'd like to point out that data emanating from the CSO's Retail Prices Index indicates that from January 2014 to August 2016, and I'm looking at that entire period, the inflation rate was at its highest during the months of October and November 2014. October and November 2014. And the inflation rate at that time stood at 9%. In fact, during the period 2014 to January 2014 to August 2016, the inflation rate was most volatile in mid-2014 when the rate increased by some 6 percentage points from June to October of that year. And Madam Speaker, may I go on to point out that the period September 2015 to November 2015 saw a notable decrease in the inflation rate. In fact, the inflation rate for November of 2015 was 1.4%, the lowest recorded in the period 2014 to August 2016. And Madam Speaker, they always sit across there and say, inflation high, food prices high. But Madam Speaker, the evidence shows otherwise. And when we said that by reducing VAT, once the merchants actually reduced the VAT, the inflation rate went down and food prices also went down, Madam Speaker. So don't let them fool the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I would like to also remind what was said about millionaires being made by this administration. And Madam Speaker, I just want to ask them if they remember live sport. I want to ask them if they remember the $34 million man who is now telling us that that is a jingle in a piggy bank. I want to ask them if they remember the hundreds of millions paid to attorneys under their administration. And Madam Speaker, I just find it amazing that they sit there whilst they had cannibalized the resources of the central bank during their administration. Remember, Madam Speaker, when we came into office, the overdraft for the first time since we know ourselves had reached its limit under their administration. They had pledged the Green Fund. in order to secure the overdraft. Madam Speaker, never before in the history of Trinidad and Tobago had we reached the point where any government had reached the overdraft limit in the central bank. And you know, Madam Speaker, in a few years' time, I am sure that when you ask students of economics, how do you bankrupt a country? The answer would be, give it to the UNC to run. That is how you bankrupt a country. Madam, or give it to the member for Cyperia to run. And Madam Speaker, as we continue to make sure that we do not have social meltdown in this country, as we continue to ensure that we hold the line in this economy, that we ensure that whilst we hold the line, we move the country forward. We on this side have done certain things to ensure that development can in fact take place. Madam Speaker, in the line of development, I want to speak specifically about the Town and Country Planning Division, which is an essential part of the development paradigm in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to make the point that there are clear examples in the Town and Country Planning Division during the period 2011 to 2015, where land use policy changes were undertaken under the direct supervision of the then chairman of the Advisory Town Planning Panel and were ratified at the time by the Cabinet. Now, Madam Speaker, I would like to point out certain things that occurred during the currency of the member for Caroni Central, particularly within the Town and Country Planning Division. Madam Speaker, there are two cases that were recently decided on by the courts of Trinidad and Tobago. And what was said by the judges in those two cases is instructive, as it really tells us what this administration was doing as it relates to town and country planning. The first matter, and this involved the residents of Orange Grove and surrounding areas and the restricted use of the Eddie Hart Savannah. And the second matter involves the construction of a cement batching plant in Canupia. And Madam Speaker, I would like to indicate that with regard to the one involving the residents who used the Eddie Hart Savannah, it was Ulrich Buggy Haynes Coaching School and others, against the Minister of Planning and Development. And what is instructive is that Madam Justice said, and I quote, that there was no consultation with the affected community, and further, that sufficient information was not supplied to the residents in order for them to make a proper proposal with regard to the information that they had before them. And Madam Speaker, you know, those on the other side talk about consultation all the time. And the member for Caroni Central, you will recall, was one of the architects of the so-called principles of fairness. And I wonder why he didn't think the residents that use the Eddie Hart Savannah should have been treated fairly and had consultation before they tried to erect to erect buildings on that savanna without consulting the users of the savanna. And Madam Speaker, sorry. Yes, and my colleague is reminding me that the project itself was subsequently found to be illegal. No consultation, and the architect of principles of fairness was found to have been acting illegally. And Madam Speaker, I want to also point out another matter. The concerned residents of Canupia and Pundit Rameshwar against the Minister of Planning and Sustainable Development. And in that matter, the judgment indicated that the interested party had no statutory right to have the minister review his own decision. The minister wanted to review a decision that he had already made. They said it would be contrary to the rules of good administration for the minister to be continually changing his own decision without good reason. And also that there had been no changes in the circumstances to warrant a change. But Madam Speaker, you know what is even more disturbing is that during the currency of the member for Caroni Central, when I assumed office, there were 175 review matters that were pending and awaiting the minister's attention and consideration. These matters were from the period 2010 to 2015. They were on the minister's desk, waiting to be approved by the minister. Absolutely nothing. 175 applications. And you know, Madam Speaker, what is even more interesting is that our country is experiencing an eruption in the erection of an establishment of unauthorized development and uses of land. And so there's an enforcement unit in the Town and Country Planning Division. Between 2014, 2015, and 2016, there are now over 2,000 enforcement matters that were awaiting attention. 2,000 matters that the minister failed to deal with, that I am now dealing with, Madam Speaker. 2,000 matters. And Madam Speaker, as a consequence of this maladministration, the Town and Country Planning Division has been mandated to implement the review of published policies and site development standards to ensure accurate and consistent application of policies so that no minister can willy-nilly just give anybody approval, and no member of staff could do that either. They've also been mandated to review local area plans and conduct major policy review based on ministerial direction, and we have established a complex facilitation committee where we bring together not only members of the Town and Country Planning, but members from the Ministry of Works and Transport, members from local government, so that we can facilitate development at a faster pace than ever before. But Madam Speaker, I'd like to report that under the last administration, when I came into office, there were reports from the public which suggest that some officers of the Town and Country Planning were not exercising correct procedures regarding the processing of applications. It seems as though there may have been some underhandedness over the last 5 years, and there is a suggestion that there may have been some corrupt practices. And what we have done, Madam Speaker, is establish an internal investigation, and we are addressing this issue through this investigation and also through training and mentorship at the division. So that's this kind of corruption that took place under the last 5 years will be completely eliminated. Madam Speaker, I would like to turn very quickly to the CSO. Madam Speaker, over the last 5 years, the CSO was allowed to languish. Madam Speaker, you will recall that on more than one occasion, we were told that the CSO, members of staff of the CSO, had no home. And for quite some time, they had been working from home. But Madam Speaker, I will admit that just before I became the Minister of Planning and Development, they were properly housed in a building on Frederick Street, and they have another location in Port of Spain. But I'd like to make the point, Madam Speaker, that what we have done since coming into office is to set up a team of persons from the University of the West Indies, from the private sector, from the Central Bank, and from the CSO to work on establishing the National Statistical Institute. This is an institute that will be an independent body and will not be exposed to the vagaries of manipulation in any way. But I'd like to also indicate that since coming into office, the CSO has moved assiduously to get its standards back up to a certain level. So now it's the normal information that the CSO gives out, retail prices, the labor force information and so on, is up to international standards, and we are now getting data up to September, which is a far cry from what occurred under the last administration. The CSO, and we are giving the undertaking that by the first quarter of 2017, we will bring the legislation here to make the National Statistical Institute an independent institute in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, I would like to make the point, however, that upon coming into office, we also had some issues with staff at the CSO. And we found out that our internal systems indicated that over a period of time, some officers at the CSO had been falsifying data related to the continuous sample survey of the population, labor force data in particular. And robust quality checks at the CSO revealed that data was incorrect over a period of time. But we have found this out, and Madam Speaker, the persons involved, as far as I understand it, there are 4 officers. They have been suspended. An internal investigation is taking place, and the officers have been removed from field work. It is to be noted, Madam Speaker, that this is a breach of the Statistics Act, and the DPP has been advised and asked the police has been asked to investigate. Madam Speaker, we are returning this country to good governance. And Madam Speaker, let me talk about the situation involving the CDA. Madam Speaker, over several weeks, we have heard concerns raised about leases at the CDA and the like. Madam Speaker, may I say that a review of the financial position of the organization as of August 2016, up to September 30th, 2015, the authority had incurred financial losses under Caroni Central of $45.8 million. In 2014, losses were $28.4 million. there was a total drop in total income from 40.2 million in 2014 to 36.3 million in 2015. And additionally, Madam Speaker, the actual amount spent by the authority on their development projects was 53,811,007.
Honorable Member for Arouca, Maloney, your original 45 minutes are now spent. You're entitled to 10 more minutes if you intend to avail yourself
Yes,
of it.
yes,
you
ma'am.
may proceed.
Thank you very kindly. And Madam Speaker, one of the projects that the member for Caroni Central saw as a flagship project of the CDA was the boardwalk. And on that project, the amount of $36,410,238 was spent on the boardwalk phase 2. Despite that exorbitant price tag, the CDA has, over the last financial year, requested the sum of $1,603,206 to carry out infrastructural works and repairs on that same boardwalk that they spent over $36 million to construct. The work was shoddy, the work was substandard, and there was a lack of oversight, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, we also have the situation of leases being granted outside of the development plan that is approved for the CDA. And interestingly, several of those leases were granted in September 2015. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, in September 2015, 15 leases were granted between the 2nd of September and the 6th of September 2015. The 2nd of September and the 6th of September. You know when was the election? The 7th of September 2015, Madam Speaker. So whilst we were out campaigning, they were out giving leases down at Shagaramas. And Madam Speaker, we are going to return Shagaramas to what it is supposed to be, the national park for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, we will work assiduously to ensure that employees who this previous government tried to dismiss, and that is the daily paid employees, the board, which was headed by Senator Danny Solomon, and the CEO, Ms. Joycelyn Hargraves, who has been dismissed, they had made the decision to get rid of all daily paid employees. Thankfully, there was the election, and that is 105 daily paid workers. And we have retained the jobs of those 105 daily paid workers. And Madam Speaker, may I make the point that the expenditure at CDA has gone down considerably. Advertising has gone from $1,353,752 to $148,917, an 89% change. And Madam Speaker, may I indicate that Ross Advertising was one of the main persons used for advertising. As a matter of fact, we had to pay Ross Advertising over $1 million, over $3 million for work that they had done for advertising under the profligacy of the member for Caroni Central. Consultancy and contract services, $3,937,050, now down to $1,557,000. Maintenance expenses, $3,053,990, now down to $1 million. Overtime, salaries and salary-related costs, overtime has moved from $4 million to $1 million, Madam Speaker. As I said, Madam Speaker, we are going to make sure that this country gets value for money. And Madam Speaker, my time is short. But let me make one point that needs to be made as the Minister of Planning and Development. Madam Speaker, as you know, we have said in our manifesto that we will bring to this country an extension of Vision 2020, what we are calling Vision 2030. And the SEPP Department of the Ministry of Planning and Development, the NTU, the PPRD, various aspects of the ministry have come together and they have written the draft vision document. This document has been, there has been consultation amongst stakeholders and also within ministries on the draft vision document, which I have told the member for Faizabad will be laid in the Parliament for debate, much in keeping with what he has said regarding a vision that all of us can coalesce around. And Madam Speaker, may I indicate that with regard to this vision document, there are a few salient aspects that I must highlight, and these are that we must respond to the global climate change and the implications for us as small island developing states. As you know, we have signed the Paris Agreement. Secondly, we must respond to the projected decline in fossil fuels and move to a mix of renewables and fossil fuel. Thirdly, the pace of technological change continues unabated, and we must respond to that. Robotics, and my colleague from Laventille East Morvan spoke about that, biomedical innovations, healthcare delivery, education, transportation. Every aspect of life, there have been technological developments. We have to respond to a population that is aging. We have to put things in place to ensure that we give proper health care. And we must respond to whatever domestic challenges there are. Dependence on oil and gas, and also the crime situation, food security and sustainability, and low productivity. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to indicate that the Economic Development Board, the Economic Advisory Development Board, and NTAC, the tripartite team, we have all been working on ensuring that we get the best document for Trinidad and Tobago. And I commend the work that has been done thus far. But the point I would like to make further, Madam Speaker, is that all of this document that we will be bringing has been done for free. It's been done using the staff of the ministry and staff from other ministries within the public service. Interestingly, Madam Speaker, the last government was in the process of preparing a new national development plan policy framework called Action 21. Action 21 was intended to be the next medium-term policy framework for the period 2016 to 2021. And the plan was a joint collaboration between the same SEPP and the Applied Policy Research Unit and various consultancies. The consultants were required to prepare specific chapters for inclusion in the document. And under Caroni Central, this is what occurred. Madam Speaker, Dr. Mukesh Basdeo, lecturer at UB, prepared a chapter on governance, and he charged the government $128,000 for preparing that chapter. A chapter. Dr. Roger Hossain, the same Roger Hossain who always given advice, prepared a chapter on manpower assessment at a cost of $154,000. Roger Hossain again prepared a chapter on resource allocation at a cost of $128,000. Madam Speaker, may I point out that this document never became a reality because the staff at the ministry found the work was substandard. And they got all that money. And let me say there were others, and the total amount paid, including a foreign consultant, was $1,102,000 for no work, nothing that could have been used. And Madam Speaker, let me also indicate that we are working closely with the IDB, with the UN, with the European Union to ensure that we make Trinidad and Tobago the kind of country that can survive these challenges and ensure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago get value for money, get their tax dollars are in fact worth what they put in this country, Madam Speaker. We have decided that we will do that, and we will do that whether you come along with us or whether we have to do it on our own. But it is imperative that it must be done. And Madam Speaker, this government has a plan for the development of our country. All we ask of our communities. Madam Speaker, thank you very kindly for this opportunity to contribute to this debate. Thank you.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, we will give way to the members.
Member for Caroni Central. Leader of the House. Can we just suspend for 3 minutes?
Must be on 11 o'clock. I want the time stamp on that. 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. Right? Get into semantics. Instruct the and deck upon the less than 11. Take some still photographs somewhere. Still some on the left in this house. 9:30, no.
somebody vacuous statement. Management, and then to listen today over the last week at what passes for a debate in this house, a budgetary debate, I am so disheartened. Madam Speaker, the government's team for 2017 is shaping a brighter future, a blueprint for transformation and growth. Madam Speaker, let me state that I could support this theme, this budgetary theme, because no doubt the Minister of Finance would have crafted proposals in order for us to realize some form of transformation and growth, maybe not in the short term, but over a medium to long term period. What the Minister of Finance is basically doing here is seeking to lay the foundation in this difficult time in the shaping of a sound economy. And I listened to my colleague from Arouca, Maloney, and she has put it in such a nutshell. She has explained to this House and to the wider citizenry in this country what we met when we came in 2015. But we must move on. We cannot just sit down and think about the past. We must move on. We must push forward. But in pushing forward, we have to understand what we met. We have to understand the difficult times. And it will take time. It will take effort. It will take courage for us to get ahead with the people's business. The opposition, you have attacked this theme. But Madam Speaker, I sat here and I listened to their budgetary teams from 2011. 2011, facing the issues, turning around the economy. They did nothing. 2012, from steady foundation to economic transformation. What did you study? What foundation, what economic transformation took place? What was the economic transformation that took place? 2013, stimulating growth, generating prosperity. Is that true? Is that true? 2014, sustaining growth, securing prosperity. What is that? Baseless, vacuous statements. 2015, empowering our people through sustained economic growth and prosperity. Madam Speaker, the end result of all of this falsehood, was that they spent over $400 billion in this country. That is what they have done. So all of those budgetary themes and all the accompanying proposals, I think that is what have put us in the position we are in today. I remember sitting across here as opposition chief whip for 5 years, and I lamented every single budgetary debate. No new income streams were created to support the unprecedented increases in expenditure. None. Absolutely no attempts were made at any form of diversification of this economy. None. And what was even worse, Madam Speaker, is the nature of the expenditure. Their expenditure was basically one of recurrent nature and not the capital expenditure. We spoke to them about that. In order to fund projects, what did they do? The deficit was made up by borrowing. Whether that borrowing was internal or whether it was external, that is what you all did. The net public sector debt at the end of 2010, when we demitted office, stood at 32% of gross domestic product of GDP. But with the explosion in government borrowing over the 5-year period, this ratio increased to 46.3% of GDP by September 2015. I'm accounting for your period. I want to remind this House that for the past 5 years, while I sat on the other side, I spoke about the persistent budget deficits. Whilst I acknowledge back then, and I will acknowledge now, nothing is wrong with budget deficit financing. It is a mechanism that is used across countries, across the globe, in order to grow your economies, to rejuvenate your economies. But I always say to them, what is your exit strategy? You cannot continue to remain in that position. Every year, your expenditure is increasing. No income stream to support it. So the difference between your income and your expenditure, that deficit figure must be funded from somewhere. So that's why I said there must be an exit strategy to wean the government away from this position. So I am appalled to listen. I heard when member of, please cover us out. I did not interfere with you when you spoke. When you gave your sermon, I did not interfere. Member for Tabakit, I was appalled to hear you. You're so concerned about deficit and debt to GDP ratio and all of that. Since when you care? Since when? You are one who sat here for the 5 years. 5 years and saw your government with those persistent deficit budgeted every single year. And I sat here for that period of time. And what did you do? You said nothing. You were part of that clique and you said nothing. All of a sudden now, you are standing here, a very disingenuous member for Tabakit. Very disingenuous. Madam Speaker, internationally, oil and gas prices is on the decrease throughout fiscal 2015. As a matter of fact, Trinidad and Tobago has lost something like $20 billion in annual revenue since 2014. But despite this situation, your former government took virtually no action to stabilize the public finances. You all did nothing to stabilize the public finances. For example, I'll give you an example. In 2015, while government's revenue from oil fell by $8 billion, you only reduced your expenditure by some $3 billion. So as a consequence, the fiscal deficit ballooned to $7 billion, or roughly 4.2% of your GDP. Madam Speaker, I want to say this evening, the situation before us is clear. We cannot spend what we do not have. We cannot spend what we do not have. And as the Prime Minister will say, you cannot get more from less. If our revenues have been reduced, then we have to reduce and adjust our expenditure. In other words, Madam Speaker, we must bring our revenues in line with our expenditure. If we do not do this, as a responsible government, we run the risk of mortgaging away the future of our country. That's what we are doing, mortgaging away the future of our country. And it will be on the backs of our children and grandchildren to pay this debt that we have created now. So this is the time that we need to take corrective action. This is the time when we need to become fiscally mature. This is the time. The time is now, Madam Speaker. And I'll tell you something further. It is better, Madam Speaker, that we as the government adjust our program for ourselves. We must not leave it to an external agency like the IMF to come in to do it for us. You see, I can assure you that if we allow an agency like the IMF to come in to restructure our finances, I can assure you that the first expenditure they're going to cut is recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure. Because recurrent expenditure does not result in the creation or the acquisition of fixed assets. It covers expenses like personal expenditure, salaries and wages. It covers like purchases of goods and services, transfers and subsidies, debt servicing. That is your recurrent expenditure. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago does not operate in a vacuum. We can be characterized as the Trinidad and Tobago economy, can be characterized as an open, dependent economy. We are price takers. So whatever happens in the international global market, whatever happens there, because we are price takers, we would be subject to all the fluctuations and whatnot. If prices go up, if prices go down, simply because, as I said, we are price takers. Madam Speaker, the issue for us now as a government is how do we manage, you're correct, how do we manage our economy in the face of decreasing and unstable oil prices? But there is a bigger challenge for this government, and that challenge is the expectations of the citizens of this country. Madam Speaker, as a Trinidadian, I want to believe that my fellow Trinidadians are intelligent people. They can understand, and they can more than understand, the predicament that we have found ourselves. Trinidad and Tobago is not singular in what is happening to our economy. Adjustments need to be made. What I can tell you, what we need to do is just communicate more with the public, allowing them to know at every stage what is happening. Whether our revenues are increasing, whether our revenues are decreasing, what is happening to expenditure, but the corrective measure must be taken now and communicated to the citizens of this country. Madam Speaker, permit me at this point to explain to you what is happening in other countries to demonstrate that countries similar to Trinidad and Tobago, what they are experiencing, to show that we don't operate in a vacuum, that we are not singular, we are not on our own. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. We are going to look at 4 countries. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia possesses 18% of the world's proven petroleum reserves, and it ranks as the largest exporter of petroleum. The oil and gas sector accounts for about 50% of GDP and about 85% of export earnings. But over the past 2 years, Madam Speaker, Saudi Arabia had to cut subsidies, slash spending, and started to look for new ways to raise revenue. That is the diversification process that they are going through. And only on the 26th of September, the Saudi Arabian cabinet introduced for the first time public sector wage cuts. Saudi Arabia also saw their credit rating downgraded earlier this year by Moody's because of the collapse of oil prices. In terms of economic growth, Saudi Arabia in 2011, their economic growth rate grew by 10%. By 2015, they are down to just 3.4%. Oil prices, they are predicting that for oil prices for Saudi Arabia will remain at low levels for the foreseeable future. And the government would have to implement more austerity measures to curb its budget deficit. Let's take a look at Nigeria. Madam Speaker, Nigeria is considered a middle-income emerging market as the largest economy in Africa. The oil and gas sector accounts for about 35% of GDP, and petroleum exports revenue represents over 90% of total exports revenue. But because of low oil prices, it has greatly affected the Nigerian economy. The country is officially in a recession. They are contracting by 2.2% annually for the first time in 20 years. Falling oil prices have mainly caused this slump in Nigeria. In terms of economic growth, in 2011, that economy grew by 4.9%. By 2015, they are down to 2.7%. Let's look at Norway.
What was that?
Falling oil prices. You may not understand that. Norway's share of GDP from the petroleum sector peaked at 25% in 2008 and was at 22% in 2012. However, with the decline in oil and gas prices, the contribution to Norway's GDP from the petroleum sector has slipped to 15% in 2015. Again, low prices, falling production. In the last couple of years, Norwegian energy giant Statoil, along with others in the industry, axed thousands of jobs and scaled back a lot of contracts with their suppliers. Economic growth has slowed down, and this has led to an unemployment rate of now over 4% in Norway. Investment levels have fallen too by about 1/3 since oil prices have collapsed. Household debts in Norway have reached more than 200% of annual disposable income, making Norwegians one of the most indebted people in Europe. That is Norway. I'm going to bring it closer to home, and we're going to look at Venezuela, just next door. Venezuela may have the world's largest proven oil reserves, but plunging crude prices have helped push the economy over the precipice. The economy is languishing at the bottom, Madam Speaker, of many important economic indicators. They are fearing, and Venezuela is fearing the worst. They are doing worse than Ukraine, worse than Argentina, worse than Greece. It is also one of the world's least competitive countries.
Honourable Member for Couva South, while the member for Port of Spain South has not sought my protection, I can hear you, and I would like to hear the member's contribution without any disturbance. Continue, please, member for Port of Spain South.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in this global competitive report, which was just released earlier this year, Venezuela has been placed 132nd out of 140 countries. That's where they are ranked, 132nd. Trinidad and Tobago is ranked at number 89. So the combination of depressed prices and record low oil production have had a negative effect on economic growth in Venezuela. In 2011, Venezuela's economic growth was at 4.2%. By 2015, they are negative 5.7%. Negative 5.7%. And so Venezuela's economy has been contracting since 2014 and will not return to growth anytime soon. It is being forecasted that the economy would shrink by some 9.7% for fiscal 2016. Madam Speaker, this is the environment within which Trinidad and Tobago operate. We do not operate in a vacuum. What the Minister of Finance has done in this budget, the Minister of Finance has laid the foundation for macroeconomic stability. And in fact, the Minister of Finance was clear that growth in the economy will not come overnight. He said, I will project by 2020, we will be able to even it off. We'll be able to balance the budget. He didn't say we're going to make a surplus, you know. He's prudent. He's fiscally prudent. He said by 2020, we'll be able to balance it. So to bring revenues in line with expenditure. That is what we are about, as my colleague said. It's about good governance.
Speak, member, speak.
But Madam Speaker, it will take time. It will take a lot of will. It will take strength. But at the end of the day, we as a people, we as Trinidadians and Tobagonians, we will see the light. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Madam Speaker, we are a resilient people. Very much so. And we can persevere. And I am telling you that Trinidad and Tobago, we will persevere to the end. Madam Speaker, let me take some time out. Because, again, I am appalled that they're criticizing the Minister of Finance and his budgetary proposals. But let me share with this House and share with the national community what the UNC offered us by way of budgets during their last 5 years in office. In 2011, the expenditure was $49 billion. Their revenue was $41.3 billion. Their budget deficit was $7.7 billion. And they had an oil price of $75. In 2012, the expenditure was $54.6 billion. Their revenue was $47 billion. Their budget deficit was $7.6 billion, with an oil price of $75. In 2013, the expenditure was $58.4 billion. Their revenue was $50.7 billion. The budget deficit was $7.7 billion. Their oil price of $75. These are their figures, you know. I'm just quoting them. In 2014, the expenditure was $61.2 billion. Their revenue was $55 billion. Their budget deficit was $6.4 billion. Their oil price was $80. In 2015, the expenditure was $64.7 billion. Revenue at $60.4. The budget deficit at $4.4 billion. And the oil price at $80. Notice, Madam Speaker, that each time the projected revenue increased, what did they do? They spend more and more and more. So, Madam Speaker, they have demonstrated over the last 5 years, and they have the gall and the temerity to come here to criticize the Minister of Finance's budgetary proposals. They have demonstrated complete and total irresponsibility over the last 5 years. They acted as though a budget was only about expenditure. And you know what? They have saved nothing for the rainy day. And I tell you what, now that the rain is pouring, they want us to believe that the sun is shining and we must continue to spend. Yeah. Don't cut this, don't cut that. Yes. Don't do this, don't do that. I want my road, I want my house, I want my school. Mm-hmm. But they don't understand the stringent times that we are operating under. They're not understanding that. What the Minister of Finance is doing is bringing back a measure of sanity and responsibility into fiscal affairs. That is what is happening. They, on the other side, they took no hard decisions. They implemented no significant revenue-generating measures over the last 5 years. Even something as non-oppressive as the property tax, they have not even implemented it. Almost $1 billion by now they have lost in revenue. And you want to come to tell us about prudence? Yeah. You cannot do that. You should be ashamed of what you all have done. And furthermore, you see, all of you all who were here, who sat, whether you sat in the other place or you sat here, all of you all should atone for your sins that you have committed against this country. That's right. As the Minister of Finance noted, energy revenue has fallen from $19 billion to about $2 billion over the last 2 years. And I tell you what, the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago contributes something like 34.9% to the GDP and 40% to government's revenue. It plays a major role. So this alone highlights the extremely difficult situation that we have found ourselves. But as I pointed out, we are not singular in this. Yes, we are. We live in a global society. We are price takers, member for Shogunasis. But you all want us to continue this irresponsible attitude as though money will fall from the sky. It will not happen. I have taken a look at the Minister of Finance's budgetary measures and all the measures on the energy sector, manufacturing, agriculture, infrastructure, tourism. And I am telling you, as he said, you're not going to see it overnight. It is going to come and it's going to creep up on us. It will be step by step by step. But we are going to do it. And we are going to get it done, whether you support us or not. Madam Speaker, in the rantings of the member for Separia, when she spoke, she made a statement on education, which really piqued my interest. And I pulled her Hansard to see it, page 11 of the Hansard. And she said, and I'm quoting, the Honorable Prime Minister, and that she's referring to when our leader was in opposition, the Honorable Prime Minister had complained about the number of schools being built. She went on, a policy which placed Trinidad and Tobago to be among the first countries in the world to achieve early childhood education. She continued, the member questioned the fact that it was the PNM who had made a major contribution to education in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I could not let that statement pass because it is fraught with deception. Madam Speaker, one of the critical objectives for those on the other side, and those, even the new ones who don't know, one of the critical objectives of Vision 2020 under Mr. Manning was developing an innovative people. There were 5 pillars of development, and one of them was developing an innovative people. And to achieve this objective, Madam Speaker, please protect me, protect me.
Member for Couva South, seeing that the members asked for protection, maybe you would like to take a little walk and come back in. Okay, it's late in the evening, and really, could members please observe? And I'm not going to ask again. Okay, so member for Couva South, maybe a little walk might help. Continue, please, member for Port of Spain South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to claim back my 5 minutes, sir. Yes, Madam Speaker, I was stated that one of the pillars that I am referring to is developing an innovative people under the Vision 2020 plan. And to achieve this objective, PNM's policy sought to grant universal access to early childhood care and education to all preschoolers. It was the PNM that made access to primary and secondary schools available to all its citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I can remember my grandparents recalling those days when parents had to pay for their children to go to secondary school. Let me take you back in time and remind this House and the national community about the many tertiary education spaces which were opened up. You'll recall we just had UWI, but under the PNM we increased tertiary spaces. UTT, COSTAT, and the University of the Southern Caribbean. All these were opened up under the PNM. And to support the influx of students, PNM introduced HELP, PNM introduced GATE program to assist those students. You will speak, I'm a member for Caroni Central. You know, I sat here, you made us make a faux pas. I sat here because I thought you were going to speak. So whilst I'm on my feet, you save yours for tomorrow. And don't interfere with me. Madam Speaker, our mantra was from nursery to tertiary education, free. From nursery to tertiary, free education. And let me share with you some of the school assets in this country when we demitted office in 2010. Caroni East, this is for you. 126 secondary schools, 444 primary schools, 161 early childhood care centers, 49 government-assisted schools. Caroni East, I understand that the ministry is still looking for the 100 schools built. Still looking for the 100 schools.
The imaginary.
But let me remind this House, and let me remind the national community, what UNC had to offer in terms of tertiary education. You offer dollar for dollar. Dollar for dollar. So if your tertiary education is for a year, you have to pay $50,000. If you didn't have that $25,000, you could not get tertiary education in this country. You could not get it. I am saying again that none of you could claim the legacy of education in this country. The legacy for free education in this country is the domain of the People's National Movement. And I tell you what, I'm sorry some of them are not here, because member for Shogunas West, he did law with me. We were in class together. Member for St. Augustine did law with me. Member for Separia did law with me. All of them subject to a good PNM education, free of charge. Free of charge. I thought that, Madam Speaker, this is something that I really had to debunk. Madam Speaker, I turn my attention to some constituency issues. And this is something that the member for Separia, when she spoke, she said that we claim that nothing was done for Port of Spain and for East Port of Spain. And I want to remind her, again, I took 5 years telling this House, telling the then government and the national community that nothing was done in Port of Spain. You all allow Port of Spain to deteriorate over the last 5 years. I recall this statement, this budget statement, 2011, where the then government announced that they'll be opening new economic spaces. Carrying East, you'll remember this. And to this end, they developed 5 poles for expansion in the medium term. 5 growth poles. The one that is of interest to Laventille and East Port of Spain is the 3rd growth pole. And I want to read it to this house to remind this house and the national community what we are dealing with. The 3rd growth pole will be East Port of Spain area. The intervention here will also rely heavily on the creation of business incubators, initially targeting the arts, culture, and entertainment. We also propose to restore East Port of Spain into a heritage city like Old Havana in Cuba or Old San Juan in Puerto Rico. These measures are expected to reduce the impact of poverty and steadily contribute to the economic health of these communities by optimizing existing entrepreneurial resources. We will establish a special task force, including civil society, UTT, and UWI, to develop a creative plan for new entrepreneurship in small business development, particularly in East Port of Spain. Madam Speaker, 5 years after, $400 billion after, nothing for Port of Spain, nothing for East Port of Spain, nothing for Laventille. You know what they did in 2012 or 2013, early 2013? They invited all the youths from the area, Laventille and East Port of Spain, to come to a training session, some skills training session out in the savannah one Sunday. Madam Speaker, after they spent $5 million in music and eats and drink, nothing came out of it.
How much is
that $5 million on eats and drink for over 100 persons attended.
More drinks than.
Right? Over 100 persons attended. And nothing happened. Nothing happened in East Port of Spain. $400 billion after. And now, I'm listening to me. Napier, do not shout at me across the room. Do not shout at me. And I'm not giving way. I'm not giving way.
Stand in order.
Member for Naparima, it is precisely for that reason I've been asking members to listen in silence. There's something in law called equity. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Continue, please, Member for the Spain South.
Thank you. So when the member for Superior said that they did things in Port of Spain, I am telling you, as the MP for Port of Spain South, nothing has happened. And I sat here for 5 years and I spoke about it. And if you all are truthful, you all will know what I'm saying is the truth. I want to look at housing. Madam Speaker, for the 5 years, I cajoled, pleaded, and begged for 31 decanting centers, wooden houses, along the Plaisance Road in John John. And the former government, absolutely nothing was done. I am pleased to announce that when I came into office 4 months, I was able to remove 28 people, reallocate them to different parts of the country. The Minister of Housing has assured me that where those decanting centers are located, what we will do, as we break down, as we demolish, we will construct new houses in the East Port of Spain area. With respect to roads, the Minister of Works has given me the undertaking. We have submitted the listing for roads that it will begin soon. Refurbishment and construction will begin soon. With respect to schools, there are two schools that to me are burning issues to me. They are the Southeast Government Secondary School and the Piccadilly Government Primary School. I understand that the Piccadilly Government Primary School is actually in the accounts, in the budget this year, for rebuilding of the Piccadilly School for the 2017 fiscal. I could only hope that we could do some major renovations to the Southeast Government Secondary School. Madam Speaker, I didn't intend to take this long, but I felt that I needed to clear up quite a few things. And I want to say I thank my constituents, even during my difficult times. My constituents stood with me from St. James to Woodbrook to East Port of Spain. I thank you, Madam Speaker. With those few words, I thank you.
The House.
Madam Speaker, I beg your indulgence to have a suspension for 5 minutes while I confer with the substantive leader of the House.
This House is now suspended till 7:15 p.m.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.